Hey there! We'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. By subscribing, you're helping us spread the word and connect with more amazing people like you.
Welcome to We Be Parents, where parent doctors Matthew Letterman and Alona Pulday explore current parenting topics, share stories, and help bring families closer together.
Welcome back to We Be Parents, where we go beyond the surface to explore the deep, rich, sometimes messy layers of parenting. Hi, I'm Dr. Alona Pulday.
And hi, I'm Dr. Matthew Letterman.
And today we're going to continue our exploration of the most constant thing in parenting, change.
Before we jump in, please don't forget to subscribe. If these conversations help you breathe a little deeper, reflect a little more, show up for your family in new and exciting ways, hit that subscribe button. It really helps us. Staying connected as we journey through all of the seasons of parenting together. Thank you for doing that.
Love it. So last week, we redefined the parenting journey as one of constant evolution, letting go while holding on. We challenged the idea that stability is the goal and instead offered emotional flexibility as the true skill for navigating parenting. And we talked about and introduced the tool, which was the seasons of self and child. Maybe that's something that you can go back to just to give our listeners today a refresh. But it really helps, the tool really helps parents name their own season along their child's, hold space for both grief and gratitude, create meaning rituals, and accept the evolution of change ultimately.
Yeah, it's so helpful to just practice these steps of naming both seasons, identifying the growth.
Maybe we could talk a little bit about seasons. I'm realizing we didn't define seasons for any new listeners we have.
Well, that'll just make them go back and listen.
And that's true.
So we're doing that strategically. But so seasons is thinking about the changes that people go through, whether you're children or adults, as kids are getting older.
Yeah.
You want to give some examples?
Like seeking connection, a season of seeking connection when they're younger, a season of learning to be independent as they get older.
Testing limits.
And
as a parent, learning to let go, learning to trust that they're going to be safe even though you're not next to them at all times, cultivating patience, figuring out your identity as your the needs from you as a mom or a dad start to shift.
Mm-hmm.
So we call those seasons just because, like seasons, they're changing, they're coming, and then they go. Mm-hmm. And we don't want to try and hold on to one season and avoid the growth and the movement that happens naturally. So there's naming both seasons. There's identifying the growing edge. What feels uncomfortable in this season for you and for the child. There's then holding grief and gratitude together. We can grieve the loss and we can have gratitude for what's new. We can find a shared ritual that works for this season and then speak that season aloud and talk about where we're at and what's changed and then repeat this process. And I talked about the ritual of, for me, with connection, around making pancakes and how we would make pancakes together as kids. And I remember that fondly with my dad. But as they got older, they didn't want to make pancakes anymore. So I didn't hold on to that ritual to meet needs for connection. But then they started wanting to do other things together. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't trying to hold on to the old season, but I was meeting needs for this, where they were in their development as they got older.
By creating new rituals,
supporting the new season.
Headlines and heartlines.
So I'm going to start with a success story. A new ritual emerges. A mom mourned the days her daughter asks her to braid her hair every morning. Now she's in high school and doesn't need mom in the same way anymore. But they started making tea together at night, a quiet ritual where they don't need to talk, but they share the same space. And the mom refers to it as her new braid.
Oh,
And I love that because it's really flowing with, just like you said, with the seasons, and finding the rituals that make sense at that time. And if you continue to be stuck on braiding a 6-year-old's hair when you've got a 16-year-old, you're going to be missing the opportunities for new connections and new rituals. And there's beauty. You talked about the changing seasons, but there's beauty in every season.
and it also takes the pressure off the child who's like, I know my mom likes this, so I'm going to do it for her, even though I don't really want her to braid my hair. So she's doing it out of obligation. And the mom can sense that there's something off, but they don't, that she doesn't know how to get the connection any other way. So this is really cool to say, I really have a need for connection, but I want to use a strategy that meets your needs and mine. And if braiding your hair doesn't meet a need for care and connection and contributing to you, what would? And that's, to me, what's beautiful is being open to new strategies to meet those same needs, because the needs don't change. We always have a need for connection, but how we want to meet that need for connection will change.
And the more that you invite your kid, make it comfortable to evolve, the more you invite your kids to suggest and share rituals. For example, our girls know I love to read, and I used to read to them all the time. And they got to a point where they didn't want me to read to them anymore, but they knew how much reading was important to me. And so they came with the idea of now they're going to read to me. And we can both still be experiencing these stories together, but in a very different way. And it doesn't always have to be like this mom, went from braiding hair to making tea. I'm curious in that story if, there's magic in braiding hair, but there's also that opportunity while you're braiding hair to be talking to your child and learning how to do that in this ritual of having tea together at night.
Exactly. I like that.
Very beautiful.
So should we share a challenge story?
Absolutely.
Here's my 8-year-old son stopped reaching for my hand in public. It hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to pull back, but I also didn't want to lose him. So how do I hold on without smothering him? And this is one of those subtle shifts that feels like a loss. But what if instead of grasping for the same connection, we open ourselves to the new ways that they want to connect? I think that's what I was talking about before, which is maybe it's not the hand holding, maybe it's the eye contact now, maybe it's a shared laugh, maybe it's an inside joke. Are there other ways to connect? So get very clear about the needs and not so attached to the strategy. In nonviolent communication, we always talk about being strongly attached to the needs, loosely attached to the strategy, and that is super helpful in these situations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it does hit you hard. It makes me think of when I would pick up the girls from school and I would hug them and smother them with kisses. And I remember them telling me, Mom, that's embarrassing now, whereas when they were younger, it was something that lit them up. And just connecting to, they're older and that's embarrassing for them, but they still take a hug. And boy, does that feel nice.
Yeah.
And I can kiss them when we're alone in the car,
I think that's helpful. That's a perfect example. When I'm driving with them, they used to be fine with me kissing them, giving them a big hug before they go into school. And now they don't necessarily want that. But I've said to them, would you like me, I'd love a hug and a kiss if you're willing. Would you like me to stop the car before we get to school? Or we can do it over here. Or would you like just a hug? Or is it okay if I hug you? So there's all different things. If I forget to do it before we get to school, sometimes we can do it before we get in the car. Who says you have to do it right when you get to school? So they love the fact that we're trying to do it in a way that meets their needs. So they also want to care for our needs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It makes me think of that song, Butterfly Kisses. Henry's talking about how his daughter's growing and evolving as she's getting ready for her wedding day.
Yeah.
And that one line where she's now 16, not little anymore, and she says, "I'm only going to kiss you on the cheek this time." And I think every parent can, feel that transition of them growing up and them being their own person and them wanting and craving some independence and mutuality around their uh, adulthood or, growing out of childhood and being recognized for that. So yeah, it's beautiful. It's the gratitude and the beauty and the mourning.
Yeah.
And holding both. But in that is the opportunity to get creative around new and beautiful rituals. So if you've been listening to us for a while, we get a lot of questions about what to do in tricky parenting or relationship moments.
Yeah, and if I'm being real, I'm asking Alona those same questions all the time. I get into those same tricky moments as everybody else does. And as much as we wish we could be there for each other in those exact moments, we just can't always be.
Yeah, that's why we partnered with the amazing team at Connectin to create something we truly believe in, an AI coach called Amari. And we didn't just lend our names, we helped build it and train it and brought in everything we've learned about emotional healing, connection, and communication.
Yeah, we spent years training and learning, and we've created Amari, who is so calm and grounded, listens deeply and responds with warmth, clarity, and compassion. There's no judgment, no reactivity. In fact, we tasked our children with trying to get Amari reactive, and they still haven't succeeded. It's just steady support when you need it most.
We use it ourselves all the time, especially when we feel stuck or overwhelmed. And Amari's really helped us pause, reflect, given us insight that helps us come back to each other.
Yeah, we designed Amari to help you strengthen the relationships that matter most, starting with the one you have with yourself.
And we are so excited that you can try it now at webeparents.com and click on We Be Connectin with a K to sign up. And when you have your Amari moment, please let us know, as we'd love to hear about it. I have another challenge story, a mother's identity crisis. My daughter recently got married and I feel devastated. For so long, being her mother felt like my identity. Now, who am I to her? Who am I to myself? I think this is a question many of us have as our children evolve and grow more independent. You described it beautifully last time. Maybe you can share that story again about your mom when you went off to college. And there's a redefining of who we are in relation to them.
Yeah. And when I went up to, before I was leaving college, my mom was crying and saying, she's really sad. And I asked her what she's sad about. And she said, well, you don't need me anymore. And I said, well, it's not that I don't need you anymore. It's just I need you in a different way. And she said that really helped her, really helped reassure her.
How mature of you.
Yeah.
I mean, really. But yeah, parenthood shapes and defines us for such a long stretch of time. But you go from mommy to mom to, and all of these evolutions are part of the journey. Do you want to move on to letters from our listeners?
Let's do it. So the first one we are going to do is, I have a 16-year-old daughter who used to tell me everything. Now I'm lucky if I get a full sentence. I know she needs space, but I miss our connection. How do I show up without pushing her away?
What a great question. I think this is where the tool that you shared is super helpful in naming the season. The best thing that a parent can do in this situation is not take that personally.
Okay.
Is to be able to, in the same way that she needs some space, create enough space to give some self-empathy, because there's grief in that. to own that there's grief in that, but that grief does not indicate that something was lost or that something now, something good is gone and something bad or wrong is present. Instead, it's something great. Yeah, she shared everything with me, and what a blessing that was at the time. And now we're in a new time, a time where she's seeking independence, where she's figuring out who she is, and where she needs a space to be encouraged and invited to do that. And how, as a parent, can you connect through support, through silent acceptance, through the creative way, little notes that go on the mirror just to remind her that you're there, but still honoring her space and not requiring her to speak should she not want to.
Yeah, I like that, where you're checking in and not being attached to it having to be the same way. I also think when somebody is choosing not to talk, they're still trying to meet needs. So I believe that everything people are doing is to meet needs. Everything they're thinking is to meet needs. And if we can get curious about what needs they're trying to meet, it helps us as well. So, for example, if the daughter doesn't want to talk now, it could be simply, I just want to be to myself, like you're saying. So it's self-care. It could also be, hey, when I do bring stuff up, maybe the person shifts the conversation and tells a story about themselves. Or maybe they give advice. Or maybe they tell them, with sort of correct them. Well, the reason you're having that problem is because of this. So they've learned to not speak because it doesn't meet their needs. So I think there's an opportunity here also to check, hey, I'm wondering if there's something that I'm doing that's making it uncomfortable, or even don't even bring that up. You can just think to yourself and reflect.
Mm-hmm.
So I think before we assume that it's just a stage or a season, there's also an opportunity to check in, because a lot of kids that were brought up in that authoritarian household, as a lot of us were taught as parents from our parents that's the right way to parent, they go from submission to rebellion. And they've been submitting for so long that they then say, hey, I don't have to listen anymore. I don't have to talk anymore. So I think there's an opportunity also to check in and make sure that dynamic doesn't need tending to.
Yeah, and if that dynamic exists, I love naming that. And if that dynamic does exist, strongly encourage parents to listen to the Heart Hug episode, because I think that tool is such a gift to children who want to connect but are nervous about feedback or advice or kind of being trampled over. And so, yes, that's a great reminder.
And to be intentional, like you said, with the Heart Hug, which is giving empathy, to let them know that you're going to do that. Mm-hmm. So you can say, hey, if you share something about school, I've learned this new thing about just giving a heart hug, being present. I don't want to give you advice or ask probing questions. I just want to give you empathy and let you know that I'm present with you. Mm-hmm. And the Heart Hug is a fantastic way to do that, where you're basically listening and reflecting back what you're hearing and just being there with them. And you can practice that. And I think there's opportunities when you're driving or cooking or whatever you're doing together to do that, but name it with them so that they are aware that you're trying to show up differently, should that be an issue.
Yeah. And I love that you named cooking and driving, because those are examples of side-by-side connections where you don't have to have conversation. You can be listening to music together. You're engaged in creating a dish together. And so you're together, but you're honoring the desire for space as well.
This episode of We Be Parents is brought to you by We Be Calm, the child calmer designed by doctors and loved by parents.
Struggling with bedtime routines or managing your child's anxiety? We Be Calm transforms deep breathing into a fun and engaging activity, helping kids find their inner calm. Perfect for bedtime stressful moments or anytime your child needs a little extra help to stay calm. Visit webecalm.com to learn more and bring tranquility to your family. We be calm because we be in this together. Here's another one. My son just left for college, and while I'm so proud of him, I'm haunted by the feeling that I didn't do enough, that I missed something crucial. How do I stop replaying the past and start trusting the future?
So how do I stop replaying the past, start trusting the future? And there's just this worry, this sort of undertow of, I didn't do enough, I wasn't a good enough parent.
And again, that connection to I didn't do enough, meaning something is now wrong. Sitting in just the grief rather than holding the grief and the gratitude of thinking that you didn't do enough is not a sign of failure. It's a deep sign of care. It's a questioning of that care as they go off on their own, and you are redefining your relationship and connection.
So it's really coming from a part that wants to make sure you contributed fully or as fully as possible to your child and sees some missed opportunities potentially and feels some sadness around a missed opportunity to contribute to your child.
Mm-hmm.
And I think coming from that needs-based consciousness of, oh, I'm just feeling a little sadness. There was some missed opportunities to contribute. Doesn't mean you didn't contribute. Doesn't mean you were a good or a bad parent. It just means you're really connecting to a desire to have contributed one more time or however many times.
Yes. And that's where practicing and holding both grief and gratitude. Oh, I'm sad about I'm sad about the thought that maybe I could have done more. But boy, am I really connecting to how proud I am for my son's independence.
Yeah. And when you do that, it does what we talk about, which is the question said, how do I stop replaying the past and start trusting the future? That's trying to make that part of you that's feeling grief be quiet. And we all know if we have crying children, if we try to shut them up, they cry louder. And it's the same thing here. If you have a part of you that is grieving, that is upset, it needs empathy and compassion and soothing. And then that part will start to calm down, and then you can naturally move into the future. So it's a little counterintuitive here.
And I love that you use the word move, because I think to some degree it's an unrealistic expectation to not reflect on the past and expect to trust the future. We don't know what the future will bring. All we have is the present. And one of the greatest gifts we can do is live in that present and live our fullest, best lives, contribute as we wish, as we desire, as we're excited to connect to our aliveness and our passion and our authenticity. And so that we're living that optimal life in the present, we're providing that optimal environment. And that doesn't mean always good, right? It's going to have good days, going to have bad days, but that you're living your authentic best life. And that contributes to the future.
Yeah. And it's also to check into that part, like, what is enough?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's coming from an energy of there's a right amount and you didn't hit it. And I don't think there's such a thing as a right amount. So it's really just sadness that there's a change in the seasons. And that part is expressing it in a way that's really painful versus like, yeah, I am feeling really sad. The child's going off to college. Yeah. And I'm thinking about all the times. And for a while there, I was excited for them to go to college because I was so tired and whatever it is, but connect to that. And it's really amazing how that moves through you. But to me, this is a sign of a need for mourning.
Yes. But in that mourning comes the realization that I I'm not stopping to contribute to my child just because they went off to college. I'm just going to contribute in a different way. And when I can connect to that, I can continue to see ways that because I imagine for this parent, contributing brings tremendous joy,
Right.
meaning and purpose. And so how do you do that,
Right.
even though your child is not physically
Right.
present with you?
Because that's what changes. What changes are the strategies that you use to meet needs. So how I contributed to my child before they went to college is different than how I contribute to my child when they're in college.
Mm-hmm.
But there's always a need for contribution. And to me, that's what's exciting about nonviolent communication is you can bring these needs with you at all stages. But at each season, the strategies are changing. Just like my mom, who, in college came and talked to me, and I was meeting someone when I was struggling in that first semester and feeling lonely and not really like was my home. So again, contribution, but it was very different. I didn't need contribution like that when I was younger. Now I needed that in college.
Yeah. Here's a last one. Letting go of the dream. I always pictured my son and I sharing a love of sports, but he's just not interested. I know I should support his passions, but part of me feels like I'm losing the dream I had. How do I let go? Oh, I think that's an important one. And I think, that goes to your story of the pancakes. You and your dad love to make pancakes. Our daughters love you to make them pancakes. That's not a shared experience in our family, but
When we went to visit him,
it was shared experience.
Yeah, he wanted to make
Gramps.
right. So now Grandpa made pancakes with the grandkids.
Yes.
And I told him, hey, this is new seasons. You got to let go of that.
Exactly.
But that was exciting for them because it was something new,
Mm-hmm.
which was interesting to me as I'm thinking back. Like they were too young. They were old enough now. They didn't want to make pancakes with me, but Gramps wanted to make pancakes with them. And they were actually excited to try that out.
Yeah. And then for you, it was a morning this was an exciting experience that brought so many wonderful memories for you. And there was a morning around the fact that your daughters didn't share in that excitement.
I was crying when he was making pancakes. I'm like, why are you making pancakes with him? And they just didn't know why I was crying. But anyway, I'm kidding.
And I think there's an ownership in that story of, we do have expectations and dreams and desires for our children. And we come to the realization, hopefully we come to the realization that they are their own being and their passions might and will be very different from ours. And so, there's this notion of, meet them where they're at and support them no matter what. And yes, and grieve the fact that, you have expectations and dreams and desires from them that weren't met. And there's an opportunity, there's a real fear of mourning, I think, a real weight that it carries. And I don't think people realize how healing it can be to spend a little time in mourning and really connect to that grief.
If you were going to talk more about that, I remember for me learning about mourning, I was like, great, I'm ready to mourn, but what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
So when you mourn, what do you do?
I connect to what I'm feeling. I allow those unpleasant emotions to surface. A lot of times, most of the time, it's sadness. It's tremendous sadness over a loss or a missed opportunity or a misfire and disconnection. And I sit with it. And I reflect on the pain. And over time, what I notice is a transformation. As I process through that pain, I also have a gift of expansion and opportunity that kind of just naturally finds itself, like, where do we go from here?
And I think people are surprised when you tell them, hey, that sadness just sort of flows. It's not like it's this weight that just sits there for the rest of your days, or a weight that you have to pick up and move off at some point. It's alive. There's an energy to it, and it comes and then it flows, just like happiness or joy. Nobody's worried that happiness is going to stay and never leave. It comes, and then eventually it goes on its way. I think that to me was really reassuring. Like, you can feel the sadness and the sensations in your body, and there's a movement to them.
Yeah. And I think, there's in that grieving, the enlightenment around, there are plenty of things that I've wanted the girls to do and they're just not interested. And there's grieving that, and out of that coming, well, there are a lot of things they are interested in. Can we find a common shared space? And how do we light up together around that? So for this parent, the same. It might not be sports, but there might be something really cool that they and their son can connect on and have a shared ritual that will evolve and will possibly change, but will be theirs over the seasons.
Yeah, and this comes up when there's parents that wanted a son and they get two girls. And it's like, oh, I was imagining football and cheering for them in football, and now you're cheering for them at ballet class, and you're still cheering and you're supporting them, and it's just a different experience of connection, and you can mourn some of the thoughts and memories, but also really enjoy the sense of connection.
I love that. And I love that reminder that letting go of a dream can really create space for an amazing reality. And that's a perfect example. Yes, letting go of the dream of, oh, it's going to be sports. And then cherishing the reality that, oh, it's dance or musical theater or something that you're watching your child light up.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at your eyes now, and even your eyes, as you think about that, they get bigger, and as your heart expands that experience.
It reminds me of a comedian that made a joke about that with his basically saying the same thing. And he's like, I'm going to cheer just as hard in ballet class as I was as a football player. And he was like, he was yelling. He's like, you call that a pirouette? You get your head in the game, kid. Yeah.
Ah, that's funny.
And it's funny.
It's funny and endearing at the same. All right. So, Matt, what do we want to leave our audience with today? What's our one last thing?
So parenting is not about creating carbon copies of our dreams. It's about witnessing the unfolding of their own. And in doing so, we discover new parts of ourselves too.
I love that. Encouraging them to grow, we grow with them. Oh.
And I think if you do one thing as a parent, to me, it's allowing your child's authentic self, who they are, to feel safe to come out. And if you're doing that, you're on the right road.
Your experiences and feedback are invaluable to us.
Please email us at parents@webetogether.com with your own cheers and tears, as well as any questions or stories you'd like to share.
And we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Bye for now.